Okay, I'm gonna share the screen. Does everybody have the slide on their computer?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I think we're ready to start.
Very good. This is the January 18th, 2022 meeting of the City of Charleston Board of Zoning Appeals zoning. President are Mr. Morrison, Ms. Grass, Ms. Richards, Mr. Bennett, and Mr. Robinson. Present from the planning staff are Mr. Batchel and Ms. Ashby and Mr. Valentine. These proceedings are being recorded, and we ask that those who speak identify themselves for the record. We'll conduct this meeting in usual fashion. We will first receive information from city staff about the application and their recommendation. If the recommendation is favorable and no one objects to the application, usually the Board of Zoning Appeals treats the matter as being uncontested and passes it as a matter of course. If, however, the city recommends against the application, or there is opposition to the application, we treat the application as contested and hear from the applicant and anyone else who's in favor of the application. Next, we hear from anyone opposed, followed by a short rebuttal from the applicant. We then close the public hearing portion of the meeting for that particular application and open discussion to the Board of Zoning Appeals members only. We'll then make a decision to approve with conditions, or deny the application. The Board of Zoning Appeals zoning has the authority to do three things. First, to hear appeals to decisions of the zoning administrator. Second, to grant special exceptions, a fact-finding function of the board. And third, to grant variances to the zoning ordinance if the application meets the hardship test outlined in section 54-924 of the ordinance. The board may deliberate and make a final decision on a matter by a majority vote of members present at the hearing and qualified to vote, provided that not less than a quorum is present and qualified to vote. However, an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the board members present and voting shall be required before a use variance may be granted. For a variance to be granted, the Board of Zoning Appeals must make the following findings. A, that they are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property. B, these conditions do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity. C, because of these conditions, the application of the ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. And D, the authorization of a variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property or to the public good, and the character of the district will not be harmed by the granting of the variance. First item on the agenda is a review of the minutes of the December 7th, 2021 board meeting. Everyone has been sent copies of those minutes. And are there any corrections, additions, deletions, or comments on the minutes? Hearing none, a motion for approval is made by Mr. Morrison, seconded by Ms. Grass. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Ms. Grass?
Aye.
Ms. Richards?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Second item on the agenda is a review of the December 21st, 2021 board meeting. We cannot hear that at this particular meeting because there is not a quorum present that was present at that particular meeting. So that item will be deferred. Next item on the agenda is number 3, 1595 Oceanic Street. Request a special exception under section 54-206 Q for use of the property for an electric substation, Zone C. Mr. Batchelder.
This concerns a property off Oceanic Street, which runs parallel to I-526. And it is in the northern part of the peninsula. So this map shows the location of the property. And this map shows the zoning of the property, which is conservation. And you can see that it's in an area with a variety of zonings. We have the planning and development zoning represented by the light purple. That area is part of a new redevelopment area called Magnolia, and Elliott Street, that bridge, that extension of Elliott Street was constructed to provide access, another means of access to that property. And that's about to get underway with development finally after many years of cleanup, environmental cleanup, and other matters. So my understanding is that the substation on this property is being built to help serve that developing area, which has been industrial in the past. We have a heavy industrial zone property right next door that happens to be a cemetery, so don't know why the city gave it that zoning back then, but and then we have, of course, some heavy industrial zoning and some residential on the other side of Interstate 26. So here's an aerial view just showing the property, some of its marsh. Don't know that it ever had any development on it. The property to the left in this view is the skate park that is operated by the Parks and Recreation Commission. And then you see the cemetery to the right. So an application was submitted to allow an electric substation to be constructed on this property by Dominion. And this is the section in the zoning ordinance that is applicable. Basically says that the board, after review, must find that such station is essential for the service of the immediate area, will be enclosed within an appropriate woven wire or solid fence, will be suitably landscaped, and no storage of vehicles or equipment will occur. The applicant, in their response, indicates that those conditions will be met, and we will have to review the site plan internally through the city, and we will certainly make sure that the landscaping that is provided is suitable. And I think probably from the cemetery and from the road and the skate park, for that matter, are the three sides that we'll be most concerned about. I don't think they'll impact the vegetation too much along the critical line, but anyway, so our recommendation is for approval of this request. And I know that the applicant is present tonight in case there are any questions or you would like to hear from him. We did not receive any objections or letters of concern or anything like that. So publicly, there's no opposition that we're aware of.
City recommends approval and there is no opposition. The motion is made for approval by Mr. Morrison, second by Ms. Grass. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison?
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry, can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I wasn't ready to move for approval. I'm curious to know, I just wanted to ask, the substation will not impact any of the marsh area?
I don't have a site plan to say definitively yes, but the applicant is on the call and can join if you'd like.
I would just like that answered, please.
Okay. So can we promote James Wilson to be an attendee?
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me okay?
Yes, Mr. Wilson, would you allow Mr. Batchelder to swear you in?
All right, sorry, thank you.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Please proceed.
Thanks. So I'm James Wilson with Wildwood Bond Dickinson here on behalf of the applicant. And Ms. Grass, to your question, the exact design of the electric substation that Dominion will put in place here, hasn't been finalized, but they are, of course, fully aware of both the tree ordinance as well as setback requirements from the critical line, and so they, of course, have to address those in their site plan, which will of course go through the regular process of zoning and whichever other approvals. Maybe there's a TRC approval as well when that goes through. So I think the short answer is yes, that they're very aware of the marsh on the back of the site and are planning accordingly in terms of how they'll lay out their substation. That's probably the best I can explain at the moment. I don't know if we need more. I think we do have Westy Westmoreland, who's with Dominion Energy, also signed up if we need more on that subject. And just while I'm speaking, 2 more seconds, just want to make everyone aware. So we do have an agreement in place with Monrovia Cemetery, which actually is swapping this land with us with land immediately north of the cemetery, just on the other side of the cemetery, that has been sort of improved for their use. And so this is something that the Monrovia organization, Union Cemetery Organization, is supportive of. Thanks.
Can I ask you one more question, please? Thank you for answering that. So can you just give me an idea of what the footprint is for a substation? Or, I mean, is it a large structure? I'm just trying to kind of wrap my head around what that would be.
I'm thinking but probably the easiest thing to do would be to picture an existing one, like on Meeting Street, just north of the crosstown where the bridge comes in. There's an Dominion's got a substation right there. Just if you can picture, there's obviously electrical equipment there. As you see on the image that Mr. Batchelder has, there are already electric transmission lines that run along Oceanic Street. You can see them running right along the street there. And that's part of what makes this a very appropriate and useful site for a substation, because you don't have to run transmission lines to it. But essentially, if you can picture some electrical equipment and it's funny, we pass substations all the time and don't pay a whole lot of attention to them, but there's elevated electrical equipment and connections to those transmission lines in there. And then, as Mr. Batchelder described, of course, it has to be under our zoning ordinance. It has to be screened with appropriate fencing for aesthetic purposes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Morrison moves for approval, seconded by Ms. Grass. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Ms. Grass?
Bye.
Ms. Richards?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Next item is B1 26-28 Cumberland Street. Request the fourth one-year extension of a vested right that expires on December 31st, 2021, pursuant to section 54-962. Vested right pertains to a special exception granted under section 54-220 on February 2nd, 2016, with conditions for a 50-unit accommodations use in a GB-A General Business Accommodation Zone District. Mr. Batchelder.
So this is an approval that concerns these 5 parcels of land along the north side of Cumberland Street and one that fronts on Lingard Street. So the approval was granted, and we've been waiting for something to happen on this property, but nothing has, unfortunately. But they want to extend the request and are have properly applied for it. Their application did come in before the December 31st expiration of the vested right. So we feel that they've met the requirement for the extension, and we recommend approval of this request. It's been approved by the board 3 times before, so we don't see anything that's changed that would preclude this from being extended.
The city recommends approval. Is there anyone present who wishes to comment, Mr. Batchelder?
No, nobody has objected or signed up to speak.
If the board remembers that this was a matter of right held by the property owner by virtue of a prior approval. Motion for approval of this particular item is made by Ms. Grass, second by Ms. Richards. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Ms. Grass?
Aye.
Ms. Richards? Ms. Richards?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Next item on the agenda is number B2, 42 Charlotte Street, BZA-Z. Request a variance from section 54-301 to allow construction of an additional dwelling unit, duplex, with a 17.7-foot rear setback, 25 feet required, zone DR1F. Mr. Batchelder.
42 Charlotte Street is a residential property within the BZA-Z neighborhood. And this is the lot in question, very deep lot, very large lot. And it, because of the zoning, does permit multiple residential units on it. There's a historic home up front, and that remains a single family home. This application concerns a new building that would be built at the back of the property. Here's an aerial view just showing the historic home up front. And the new building would be back here. The rear setback requirement on this property is 25 feet from the rear property line. This is just an aerial image which shows those building footprints that exist on this property and the surrounding properties. The application from the applicant, John Paul Hughley, and his request for the variance and reasons for support. These are just photographs. So we're talking about an area back here. And one thing I'll point out is are the large trees on the property. You'll see one on a site plan that affects the siting of the building. More photographs. So this is a site plan of the existing conditions. And this large tree, this is I guess I should do this. This large tree right here, this is a grand tree, and So there's a base around that tree. There's a space rather that is protected where new buildings cannot encroach into the space in order to help protect the tree. And that is shown here. So you see that that ring right here based on the 48-inch diameter tree size. The building that's proposed is shown here. This two-story element was going to be on the front originally, but the BAR staff was opposed to that. And I wasn't party to those discussions, but that caused the applicant to request that small extension to the footprint be placed in the back to accommodate a kitchen on the second floor. So that is the request before you, is to allow this addition right here in a very small part of the building itself to encroach into the rear 25-foot setback. This is an elevation that just shows the proposed rear elevation, or north elevation of that building. And this would be the two-story element that encroaches down to 17 feet from the rear property line. And the applicant has provided all this information as well from neighbors that they contacted, and that they are indicating are supporting the request or not opposed to the request. I see many homeowners on Charlotte Street and few on Chapel. Including adjacent neighbors. So those are the slides I pulled out just to make my presentation of this application. I think that there is a case for hardship with the tree and not being able to pull the building forward a little bit. You see there's space certainly that they could pull it forward if it weren't for that tree and avoid the setback variance. But in this case, that tree prevents that from happening. So, and I think, the building is, I think, 200 feet back from Charlotte Street, I believe. So this is a extremely deep lot, and they're just simply trying to accommodate one more residential unit. Actually, this is 2 units within this building that would be located here. So anyway, my recommendation is for approval. And yeah, that's my presentation.
City recommends approval. Is there anyone present in opposition?
No, Mr. Robinson, no one present in opposition.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Batchelder, just so I'm clear, is approval, or is the decision purely based on the small extension, or for the rest of the building that also appears to exceed the setback line? I just want to be clear.
Oh, it's for the entire length of the building, the encroachment by the entire length. Just that small encroachment for the main building, and then this larger encroachment that I've highlighted here for the.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to be clear on what portion was up for discussion.
So how many feet is the small encroachment, Lee?
Well, it comes, it's 23.5 feet at this location and 24 feet, 4 inches at this location.
Okay. And 25's the requirement?
That's correct.
Okay.
Any other comments? Any questions? Any more questions? Is there a motion for approval?
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Next item on the agenda is number B3. 188 Mary Ellen Drive, Longborough. Request a variance from section 54-250 Longborough Master Plan PUD zoning regulations to allow 2-story and 1-story additions, screen porch, master bedroom, deck, and stair that encroach into the required 10-foot setback from the critical line buffer, zone PUD. Mr. Batchelor.
Here's a image of the location of the lot along Mary Ellen Drive, and you can see that the rear property line varies in its location. That is abutting a marsh. And if I move here, so you see the lot and the house that sits on that lot today and the marsh. The zoning map, this lot is part of the plan unit development, the Longborough plan unit development that was adopted by the city to allow the redevelopment of this property, I think approximately 20 years ago. Here's the application. The survey shows the existing house on this lot. It shows the critical line back here, and it shows a critical line buffer line right here, 25 feet off of the critical line. And then the PUD actually requires a 10-foot building setback beyond that critical line buffer. So it's the building setback, that 10-foot building setback beyond the buffer, the critical line buffer, not the critical line, but the critical line buffer that's adjacent to it, that is proposed to be reduced slightly with a few encroachments. And you'll see on this site plan what those encroachments are. So got a 2-story building addition right here, which will be a screen porch on the lower level and a bedroom above. And then a set of stairs that come down. There's a small corner right here that encroaches. And then a new deck over here with a small corner that will encroach here. So really the curve, the shape of the rear property line and the critical line affects the setback line, which creates this unusual shape, I guess I would say, with the rear property line or setback. These are floor plans just illustrating what those additions will be. Again, screen porch down here, master bedroom here. And then the rest of the encroachments are just the deck and the stairs right here, the ground level. And elevations. And then this is an email from the property management, property manager, I guess, for the Longborough neighborhood, just indicating that they have approved the plans. So that's everything that was submitted with this application. My feeling is that the shape of the rear property line, which is the critical line of this property, affects the shape of the setback line on this lot, and that creates a hardship that I think justifies the minor encroachments that we see here on these plans. So I think the request is reasonable, and I recommend approval of this request to you.
City recommends approval. Is there opposition present?
No, Mr. Robinson, no opposition.
Ms. Richards moves for approval, seconded by Mr. Bennett. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Ms. Grass?
I actually wanted to ask a question. Can I do that now of Mr.
Yes, ma'am, you can.
Mr. Batchelder, so the shape of the critical line, the buffer area, would that be similar to other areas, other lots, or is it just pertaining to this one lot?
If I go back, here you kind of see that we've got some variation in these lots that are just to the side of the subject property, but there isn't quite the degree of variation, I would say, in the rear property line location. So it's a little bit, so I think this is a unique situation, somewhat unique. I think it's generally the street follows the critical line, so you end up with rectangular lots, if that makes sense, which means rectangular building envelopes. But on this lot, there's that jog in the property line in the back, and that so they're just trying to take advantage of the building envelope, which I guess doesn't lend itself to a addition without either cutting it back or shaping it in a way that would be odd. So I think it's a reasonable request. And you can see the other thing is with this, you see that, of course, there are areas out beyond the critical line setback where they're not coming close to that building setback line. So does that help answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Ms. Grass, there's been a motion and a second. Are you prepared to vote?
Oh, yes, aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Item number B4, 405 Wayfaring Point, Daniel Island. Request a variance from section 54-263, Daniel Island Master Plan zoning regulations to allow a new garage with garage doors that are less than 90 degrees to the front setback line. Zone DI-RI. Mr. Batchelder.
So here we have another odd shaped lot. And you can see on this map that it has that odd front property line. This is a cul-de-sac that was shaped in the way it was shaped because of other trees being saved, other grand trees being saved. And so it creates this odd situation. The architect designed the house, went through the ARB on Daniel Island, received their approval for the request. And then we saw the plans and I went back and forth about what I thought was the appropriate decision. Here you have the garage, the entrance to the garage right here along the line that I'm highlighting. And here you have the front property line. Actually, it's this is the front property line. And then you have the front setback line right here. So the ordinance says that those garage doors are supposed to be 90 degrees or more to the front setback line, which would, I guess, means drawing a line perpendicular to the property line at this location. And clearly this doesn't meet that requirement. I also thought, well, maybe the property line really is this, and we'll just, I mean, that's the general shape of the lot, and we could consider it that way. But in the end, I just felt like it needed a variance. And I will say that when the Daniel Island ARB looked at it, they didn't even think that it would require a variance. So I think it was it was a close to not coming before you, but I felt like probably ought to come before you just to make sure that we're doing things properly. So that's the application. The request is to allow this house to be built, and let's see. So that's the first floor to the garage and the crawl space to the house. Then you have the second floor, and there's living area over that garage. And the elevation, this is the garage structure right here. So I think, again, I think the shape of the property for me is a hardship in this case, and creating this unusual situation with the requirement on Daniel Island that garage doors be located at least 90 degrees, turned 90 degrees from the property line. And with the support of the ARB, and we have not heard of any objections or concerns from anybody on Daniel Island, we are going to recommend approval.
City recommends approval and there's no opposition. Motion for approval made by Mr. Bennett, seconded by Mr. Morrison. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Next item on the agenda is item B5, 262 Captain Goodard Road, Daniel Island. Request a variance from section 54-263 Daniel Island PUD Master Plan zoning regulations to allow a bridge to encroach up to 5 feet into a 10-foot visual buffer zone setback. Bridge is for vehicle access to a proposed single-family residence, zone DI-RI. Mr. Batchelder.
So again, we have an unusual lot on Daniel Island. Now this one's a little different because this map that shows the location of the lot also shows that there's a sizable portion up front, which is similar in size to the neighboring lots on that street. But this lot happens to include this extension, this peninsula of land, of highland that juts out into the marsh right here. And the applicant is proposing to build the house out on that peninsula of land, which means they have to provide access to it, or they want to provide vehicular access to it by means of a driveway that would go up to the house. So this is an aerial view of the lot, which is outlined in blue. It's on the north end of Daniel Island. And another view showing the zoning on the property, application form, the explanation of the applicant's variance request, survey showing what this does show is the property boundary, which is the critical line. This shows the visual buffer zone, 20-foot visual buffer zone the city zoning ordinance establishes. So that's 20 feet back from the critical line. Then there's a dashed line right here. Well, that's a 25-foot OCRM buffer that is required. I think that was a requirement placed on the property when they probably had to do a little bit of filling to access this area. And then you see this dash line right here, the inside dash line. So that is the 10-foot building setback line from the visual buffer zone. So in addition to the 20-foot visual buffer zone, the city requires a 10-foot building setback. And the application includes these photographs showing the views from different locations on the property. more views from the property. More information about the property. And then the site plan is showing the proposed improvements. Now, the area we're talking about is this area right here. They would construct retaining walls in the area shown here with these dark lines. So there would be retaining walls, and the land within that area would be built up. But within this area, they're not able to do that. And so they're proposing to construct a bridge, and that bridge would have to encroach into the setback, building setback. So here is the setback, and you can see the dark green area is the portion of the city's building setback, that 10-foot building setback area beyond the OCRM critical line buffer. And the bridge will minimize that down to the total encroachment at the widest part here would be 5 feet into that critical, that visual buffer zone setback. And then they've submitted this image showing the bridge. So that is the application that was submitted. The Daniel Island Architectural Review Board has not made a decision on this plan. So there is no comments from them one way or the other. And that is a bit unusual, because normally we wouldn't see any plans on a proposed house until the Daniel Island ARB has made their decision. And I did learn that when they originally platted this lot, when the Daniel Island Company platted this lot for sale, they were not envisioning a house going out on this peninsula. So this is a different take on what to do on this property. But nevertheless, that this is the application that's before us. So there's not been any opposition or concerns that have been voiced by anybody about this request. It's a little bit concerning to have, seems like to have a house built out here with this sort of access and encroachment into our visual buffer zone setback. But this is an unusual lot. So, you know, I'm not necessarily opposed to the proposal. The encroachment is limited to this specific area. And I'm not necessarily opposed to that. But I just want to point out that information. So I'm willing to support this and recommend that the board approve it. But I want you to be aware of all those things. It's unusual for us to have a plan for a house on Daniel Island that ARB out there has not approved. So,
Mr. Batchelor, is it not reasonable for us to say we'd like to have the neighborhood input before we make a decision on this?
well, you know, I think that is reasonable. I think before you do that, you'd probably want to hear from the applicant and make that decision.
Okay.
Can we, Penny, can you tell me who the people are that signed up to speak?
Is the applicant present?
Applicant, I did not see where anyone signed up to speak for.
Hey everyone, this is Steven D'Amato from Remark. Can you guys hear me?
Okay,
Stephen, are
Yes,
you prepared to speak on the application?
Yes, sir.
Would you allow Mr. Batchelder to swear you in, please?
Sure.
do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you very much. Stephen, would you please present your application?
Sure. So, like Lee was saying, this is a house that is located on what we're calling an island, just because it's so secluded and so far away from that main road, Captain Goddard Road. And the only way to get back there is to encroach into those buffer zones or areas. Now we are proposing that bulkhead to bring in fill to raise the grade due to the flood elevations on this lot. And in order to access this and to stay, above that flood elevation, we would need to incorporate a bridge element of some sort, just in this area that's shown.
What is has the neighborhood Daniel Island Association not commented on this yet?
So we've gone back and forth with Daniel Island, and they basically came back and said to us that we need to get further approval from different agencies such as OCRM, the Army Corps of Engineers, and then, of course, the City of Charleston. We've since obtained information from the Army Corps of Engineers and OCRM saying that they, I guess, are in favor, or they don't really see any issues with what we're showing, just because we do stay behind that 25-foot OCRM buffer, and we are not impeding on any wetlands.
Any other questions for the applicant?
So I just wanted to clarify, did you get a letter or approval from them, or they just didn't say?
So Daniel Island has waited to give their, I guess, formal approval just based on those agencies having all three say yes.
And
so
so,
we-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So we have the Army Corps and OCRM that both approve it. We just need the city to approve it now. But since this is an odd lot and we're having to incorporate this bridge, Lee thought it was imperative that we come to you guys to request this variance.
So I would just wanted to ask, you did get a letter from OCRM and the Army Corps?
Correct. It's more of a email correspondence, but we do have that verbiage.
Was that presented to the city upon your application to this board?
It's not on this application or presentation, just because we, due to the fact that we received it after this application was submitted.
Any other questions for the applicant? Anyone else wish to speak on behalf of the applicant? Is there any opposition?
no, Mr. Robinson, no one signed up in opposition.
That closes the public hearing portion of the meeting. Any comments, questions, or motions by the board?
Move deferral till we hear from DIARB.
I'll second that.
Been a motion and a second for deferral. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is B6, 478 King Street, Mezquite, Radcliffeborough. request a special exception under section 54-206 to allow existing late night use bar restaurant within 500 feet of a residential zone district to expand by adding outdoor patron use area, 850 square foot patio. Request a variance under section 54-317 to allow an existing bar restaurant to displace 6 on-site parking spaces and add 850 square feet of outdoor patron use area without providing 7 spaces for the added area. Expanded restaurant requires 22 spaces, 3 spaces to remain. Zone general business, Mr. Batchelder.
So this is a King Street bar located between Mary and Ann Street on the east side of King Street. Here's an aerial view just showing the property. And of course, that is the alley behind it that runs between those two streets, those two side streets, Ann and Mary, and provides access to existing parking at the back of the property. Another map showing the zoning of the property, the application, the applicant's explanation, which was revised because of the fact that we have a variance instead of a special exception for the parking issue. Again, another aerial view. This map actually shows the other late night uses, and this is what the applicant submitted. I've revised them, revised the map, and this is the revised map. There were a few late night uses that were missing from his list, so I've added those here in red. And I think all of the uses in red, they don't actually operate beyond midnight, but they're licensed from the city to operate until 2 a.m. So I think that's what threw the applicant off. Now, we still have to consider those. So you see that there are now 10, although I think number 11, which is 492 King Street, I'm pretty sure that property, which was located up here on the corner of Mary and King Street, I think they lost their right for a late night use, but I wasn't able to make that decision conclusively without doing a little more research. So that could be a late night use as well. But just with the other ones that are actually operating today, we have total occupancy of 1,583 occupants versus 1,170 occupants. So there's a big change there from what the applicant submitted. I just want to make sure you're all aware of that. And then we have this document that was submitted by the applicant. So when this bar opened and was originally approved, and it's been there for over 20 years, Silver Dollar was one of the early bars to locate up there. And they did not provide any outdoor seating. And the area back here where they're proposing to keep the emergency outside seating that they put in since COVID hit, that was parking. So you could fit more parking spaces on this property, access from this rear alley, than the 3 shown here. But it was not, I would say, easy to access and park more cars back there. I mean, you could park more, but not that many more. So they've had this outside space that they were never using. And then COVID hit and they added the outside dining under the emergency provisions that City Council adopted that allowed restaurants and bars to add outside seating on private property and displace parking without having to go through the normal process. Well, that emergency ordinance is expiring this month. In fact, I think it expires on the 22nd of January. So without this approval, this bar would have to remove that outside seating and go back to a strictly indoor seating arrangement. There's no opportunity to use the sidewalk. I mean, that's a narrow sidewalk. We don't want people out there on that sidewalk anyway because of the congestion. So their only option is to, for adding outside seating, is to add seating in this location. And as far as King Street businesses go, they have an opportunity, number one, to do that with the space in the back. They can still keep some parking spaces back there, and I suppose those would be used for employees. But a lot of places either provide outdoor seating already, or they don't have any means of providing any outside seating because their properties are just simply not, they're landlocked and don't have any outside space. So this is a situation where we've got a bar that's been in operation for a long time. We've got these new circumstances where limiting your operations to indoor only can become problematic. And so they would like to be able to use some of this outside space for outside seating. They would not increase their occupancy limit from the current occupancy limit that they have. That occupancy limit was set back in over 20 years ago, so it's pretty high. It's much higher than you would get today. And so they would not be able to increase that occupancy limit even if they wanted to with this additional space. But we have, and then the final point to make is that this is a late night use. This is a bar that operates until 2 a.m. And on the zoning map, you saw that there's residentially zoned property nearby. So this becomes one of those situations where any expansion of a late night use in this location has to go before the board and receive your approval. They've been operating here for a long time. I don't know of any objections or complaints or any problems that we've had with this particular location. They have garbage and recycling pickup in the back through that alley, so that's not really an issue. They're not adjacent to any residentially zoned areas. They are very close to the visitor center parking garage that's in the same block. So they have public parking nearby. So we've told businesses that are in this situation, if you want to keep the outside dining area that you've acquired through this emergency order of city council, that we would be supportive if the neighborhood associations are okay with it. And I think it's reasonable to let these people have some outside space. We don't want these bars and restaurants, late night uses to have people out on the street, on the sidewalk, if they need to go out and smoke a cigarette or do something like that. We'd rather have them back inside the property. So this is a way to I think, help address that situation. But the neighborhood association that I think is most impacted is the Radcliffeborough Neighborhood Association on the west side of King Street. And they don't really have a position. The email that we did receive and did incorporate into the online information here that was available does indicate that they're fine with it. This is from the president, but they, but that was written before I think the president understood that this was actually, that this location was actually not within the Radcliffeborough Neighborhood Association, but within the Mezquite-Ragborough Neighborhood Association. So the indication from the president of Radcliffeborough is that they don't have a position, they're not going to comment on this since it's in the Mezquite-Ragborough Neighborhood Association. The president of the Mezquite-Ragborough Neighborhood Association has written a letter, and that's part of the comments that you received. And that letter is objecting to this request for reasons of noise and parking. And then there's another letter comment that was submitted from a resident of Mezquite-Ragborough as well in opposition. So our position is still in support. I don't think that this small increase is really going to impact the neighborhood. And my recommendation would be to approve it, to allow this outdoor space to remain, with two conditions. Number one, that there would not be any live music or amplified sound. And by that, I mean amplified above normal conversational levels outside on this patio, and that there would be no increase in the occupancy limit for the business. So with those two conditions, I believe that this will be, this should be approved.
City recommends for approval. Is there anyone in opposition present?
Mr. Robinson, no, the Mezquite-Ragborough neighborhood could not attend the meeting. You were provided with their comments, but they also requested that we read their letter of opposition as well. That's to the discretion of you, the board members, since you have already received their comments.
I would like to hear it.
Okay, may I proceed?
Please.
Dear Mr. Batchelder, the board of Mezquite-Ragborough Neighborhood Association has reviewed the request by the Silver Dollar that is on the January 18th, 2022 Board of Zoning Appeals. The applicant is requesting a special exception to allow late night use of bar restaurant, expand outdoor patron use, and requesting a variance to displace required parking and to add outdoor patron space without providing the additional parking required under the zoning ordinance. The expanded restaurant will provide only 3 parking spaces instead of the required 22 parking spaces. We ask that the city deny the special exception and variance request. We find no basis for a hardship. The Silver Dollar has operated for more than 10 years without outdoor patron use. Additionally, approval will set a precedent that could easily extend to adjacent properties such as the Rarebit, El Jefe, and other King Street businesses. Granting similar parking variances to the adjacent properties alone would reduce required parking by more than 70 spaces, and it is doubtful that employees will use the parking garages, but instead park in the neighborhood. We are also concerned that the noise level related to amplified music and additional patrons will increase, especially as adjacent businesses see an opportunity to expand their footprints. Similarly, Radcliffeborough has successfully objected to the extension of outdoor use and parking variances on the west side of King Street. Livability and safety are among our top concerns, and expansion of late night uses and reduced parking will negatively impact our neighborhoods. Yours truly, Ferris D. Claplin, President of the Mezquite-Ragborough Neighborhood Association. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ashby.
I'd like to just add that, you know, we've taken a very hard line on the special exception for late night uses, and we have discouraged a number of people from even applying to the board for those and been successful in doing that, which is why you haven't heard too many. You have had one that I recall where we were opposed and you actually ended up denying the request, and that was a few blocks to the north of this location. But we've been pretty successful with that. We did have a business basically across the street that wanted to convert from a non-late night use to a late night use, a restaurant. And we said, we're not supporting that. And they withdrew the application from your agenda. So we've been pretty successful. I think what's different about this is an existing business, been there for a while. And they haven't had any outdoor space, and they just like to keep this space that they were able to add. So anyway.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, or motions from the board?
I have a question. I guess this is for Lee. So and I just don't know how this works, but would it be possible would a condition to allow the space but not be late night use? Is that any type of consideration, or it's all or nothing?
Well, I'd prefer that, it might be a good idea to hear from the applicants. I think in light of the opposition that we have received, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that we do that. We've got some folks on the call here on the Zoom meeting, and I know that there are some applicants, I think, that signed up.
Is there someone present representing the applicant that would care to speak?
Yes, Mr. Robinson, we have John Sullivan, who is the applicant's designer, and we have one of the owners, Stephen Shear.
Who would like to speak on behalf of the applicant?
Let's promote John Sullivan and let him tell us if anybody else should. So Stephen Shear, he signed up. He wants to speak as well. Penny, yeah.
Yes,
so let's
sir.
promote him too.
Yes, sir.
We'll swear them both in.
And correction, also Douglas Shear. He also signed up.
Okay.
Can you hear me or see me or anything?
Can hear you. Who are you?
Okay.
I can't tell.
Yeah, this is Steve Scher, the owner of
Oh,
the
Steve.
bar.
Yeah.
I apologize. I'm sitting in my car. I was coaching a basketball game and I had to leave to join this meeting. I'm sorry. But can you see me at all or just hear me? It doesn't matter, I suppose. So
why don't we have all three of you unmute, and then I'll go ahead and swear you in together.
okay.
Okay. I think we've got everybody. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
I do.
So I think you should proceed and maybe make a presentation to the board on your request.
All right. This is John Sullivan. I'll speak quickly on this. I think Lee did a good job explaining everything. I think the main thing is that we're creating a special exception, but we're not for increasing the size of the business, but not the occupancy. It's going to be the same number of people, the same occupant load. There's going to be no more people at this building with the patio than before the patio. So the objections about more noise, more people, I don't think it's founded. It's going to be the exact same occupancy. And it's been this way since September 2020 with no known complaints. They are the neighborhood association that this is part of, but we are very far away from them. The closest residential lot with a house on it is over 900 feet away. And it's on the other side of the Music Farm Charleston School of Law building, parking garage, a 3-story office building, and a school. So it's not something that a noise from this small patio would have a chance to get. We're much closer to Radcliffeborough. It's 409 feet to the closest residential lot on that side, I believe. Is that right? 490 feet. And they're not objecting to it. We're with Lee. We're not planning on, we never were having any amplified music or live music out here. It's just going to be a small patio with a couple of TVs on it, and that's it. Before the patio was in place, if anyone remembers, they used to have to block off part of the sidewalk with a rope for smokers to go out with while they're there. This has eliminated that. It's greatly cleaned up the sidewalk and made less dirt noise out there. So as far as the parking, since there's going to be, although the zoning ordinance is by area, there's really not a parking impact by this because there's going to be no more people there than before. So though we need a variance for 7 spots for this patio, there's not going to be really that added use to add that seven parking spaces. The lot back there was never in the 20+ years this business been open, been used by patrons, just employees. And on the application, I called it 9 spaces. That's 9 spaces triple parked. You could only really get 4 or 5 diagonally parked back there before this. So you're really only losing a couple of maneuverable spots there. And they've been making do. They carpool, walk, scooter, Uber. There's a parking garage that only charges $5 for the night. The business, to get about the question about the closing early, this business is really a late night business. It doesn't open, I believe, and Doug and Steve can correct me, I think it doesn't open to 9 o'clock at night anyway. So having it close early really doesn't do much for the business. And you're still going to have the problems of smokers. Where do they go for those 2 hours? They're going to have to go back out to the sidewalk then, which is not what you're going to want. And you don't want people that late after drinking out on the sidewalk anyway. You'd rather have them controlled under security. Most late night uses and businesses this size already have patios. I think there's only 1 or 2 in the area that don't. And I don't think they can, but pretty much all of them already have some kind of outdoor space that they use. So we don't think it's unreasonable to allow this.
And
Any questions for Mr. Sullivan? Who would like to speak next?
This is Steve Scher, if you don't mind me adding a thing or two.
Please.
We open at 8 o'clock, not 9. But and right next door to us is Charleston Beer Works, which has been there for maybe 7 or 8 years, and they've had a patio which is actually adjacent to the one that we built. They're connected, and they've had outdoor space that the whole time, directly next door. El Jefe's 2 doors down. They've been open for maybe 5 years. They have all the outdoors. They have a large outdoor seating area. And we actually just started our 23rd year, and it has made a big difference being able to have the outdoor seating, especially as Lee mentioned, our capacity is 200, which is pretty large for the size of our space. So when we're at capacity, it's pretty jam packed in there. So with the patio, it really helps to space everything out. Especially
Any questions for Mr. Scher? Anyone else like to speak? That's it? Third person doesn't want to speak?
Yes, I think to limit it to just early evening hours use would defeat the purpose of having, the benefit of, smokers being able to go out back and sit out on the sidewalk, first and foremost. And just that, and we feel it's been a very beneficial and positive thing.
Thank you very much. The city recommends approval, and there has been opposition read into the record. Are there any other questions, comments, or motions from the board?
I have one question for Mr. Batchelder. So do you feel like, based on what the applicant has presented regarding the adjacent late night venues having outdoor seating, outdoor areas, I guess I'm trying to address what the neighborhood association, that was one of their concerns, is that they're concerned that then the next neighbor and the next one down will then have outdoor seating, but it sounds like that already exists. I'm just trying to.
Yeah, that's a good question. The Rare Bit, which is a couple doors away from Silver Dollar, they are allowed to operate as a late night use, but they don't operate that late. From my understanding, they close before midnight. They don't have any outside seating and did not have any during the emergency order from city council, even though they probably could have, they didn't. So I don't anticipate them coming in and requesting anything. They have a space behind that building that they share with another business that is quite large and works very well for quite a few parking spaces. So I don't anticipate any requests from them. El Jefe, they do have outdoor dining that was added per the emergency provisions from city council. And I believe that they will be coming before the board and requesting your approval to be able to keep that. In their case, it's a fairly small space. Well, I don't know. It might be about the same square footage as what the Silver Dollar has, but they are, they're requesting to be able to keep what they've got or will be shortly. So that will be coming before the board. That location is right here. It says Kingdom Bar and Grill. That's not there anymore. It's El Jefe. So it's a dining area back here. But other than that, Republic, which is down here, right here, they have an outdoor space right now. And those are the late night uses on this side of the street. Beer Works is right here. No, right here, I'm sorry. This property right here. So they've got an outdoor space right here. And so those are the outdoor or the other late night uses on that side of the block.
And so you haven't heard of any complaints from any of those outdoor uses to date?
No, we haven't heard of any. We had a meeting. So prior to them making the application, we had a meeting. Well, I think it was communicated to these businesses that, by the way, your outside dining that you've had during COVID is going to expire. And you're going to have to remove that, or you're going to have to seek an approval. So we've had some meetings internally that have been attended by myself, the fire marshal, the chief building official, our neighborhood and business services director, to talk about these outdoor spaces. And we've done that with a few businesses up and down King Street. And so that other people in the city could become aware of what they are doing. And the police department was invited, but did not attend those meetings. I have not heard of any issues with this location or El Jefe. There was another business further up King Street that was proposing to come before the board and expand with additional outside space. We said absolutely not. That's not going to be something we'd ever support because it's already a very big operation, a large occupancy, and they already have outside space with their permanent location. And fortunately, they decided that they would not pursue it. So the only two that I'm aware of that I think are pursuing this opportunity to keep their outdoor space that they added is Silver Dollar and El Jefe.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments, or motions from the board?
To offer a comment, it seems to me that the two limitations, or forgive me, I'm drawing a blank on the word for
Condition.
thank you, conditions that Mr. Batchelder's proposed are reasonable. And the other thought that really boils down to, it seems like one of the big questions here is how do we address the loss of the parking? The concern from the neighborhood that so much of the parking is going to spill out over into the neighborhood doesn't seem, I have a hard time agreeing with that argument for the single reason, well, for several reasons, but one largely because there's a parking garage around the corner. And then also because the neighborhood is several blocks over. It seems to me that the employees who would be the ones who've lost the parking are likely not to spill over into the neighborhood. And so that concern to me doesn't seem like quite as big of an issue. That's my take on it anyhow.
Anything else from the board? Any motions?
Move approval with conditions proposed by the city.
There's a
Second.
motion for approval. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Second by Mr. Bennett. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Thank you very much. Next item is B7, 224 Rutledge Avenue, Cannonbar, Elliott Borough. Request a variance from section 54-317 to allow existing restaurant to displace 2 on-site parking spaces and add 380 square feet of outdoor patron use area without providing 3 spaces for the added area. Expanded restaurant requires 11 spaces, 4 spaces to remain. Zone limited business. Mr. Batchelder.
224 Rutledge Avenue is an existing business within Cannonbar, Elliott Burrow. It's Gao Bao, the restaurant that's been there for a number of years in what is a converted gas station. Well, it was a gas station, then it was a car repair place, and then it became the restaurant. So restaurant's been there. It's been very successful, very popular within the neighborhood. They were able to add some additional outside seating during the emergency COVID situation, and they would like to keep that outside space. They're not a late night use, so they're not allowed to operate beyond 11 p.m. at night. And this is the aerial view. So basically this area under here is already allowed to have outside seating in addition to the indoor seating and restaurant space. And this was parking space. So there were 2 parking spaces over on this side over here, in addition to the parking over here. And they would like to essentially build back a permanent structure where this tent is, at least half of the tent, and keep that space as additional outside seating space. Zoning map just showing the commercial zoning on the property. Application, explanation. So this is the site plan, and this is where they would like to retain or add the outdoor patron area, seating area under a structure right here. And you can see that they had 2 parking spaces in addition to the 4 that are striped here on that side. And again, another detailed drawing. And of course, has to go through the BAR, but it's the structure that they would build right here. And then this is the message we received from Marion Hawkins, who is the president of the Cannonbar Elliott Burrow Neighborhood Association. So he states that at their September 7th meeting, we voted to support the request for a permanent outdoor dining space structure. This will only remove a few spaces. They primarily have customers from foot traffic and rideshare services. The restaurant is exemplary for having minimal impact on the neighborhood. They have background music playing outside that doesn't disturb the neighbors, and then they close around 10 p.m. typically. So that's the message we received from the neighborhood association. And then this is from Jason Saccharin, the city council member for that area, indicating his support for the request. So back to the request at hand. So again, the situation kind of was brought on by the COVID situation and wanting to keep the outdoor space that they were able to add during that situation, during that emergency. And this is an even smaller space, of course, as you can see, 380 square feet, but we're supportive of this request in light of the neighborhood association support, and would just recommend that the motion for approval include conditions that there would not be any live music or amplified sound above conversational levels permitted outside. And they're adhering to that already. So I don't imagine that should be an issue, but I just want to maybe add that to the list of conditions just for the future.
City recommends approval. Is there any opposition to this application?
No, Mr. Robinson, there is no opposition.
You did receive an email, I think, a little earlier from somebody who was late.
Yes,
Submitted
and
an email to us. And they live 2 doors away on Rutledge Avenue. So, and longtime residents of the neighborhood. But I just want to point that out. We did send that to the board members too, just out of courtesy.
Did the
Yes.
board members receive that? I received a copy.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
thank you.
Are there any comments, questions, or motions from the board?
I have one for Mr. Batchelder. So would you have the condition be no outside music at all, or just live music or amplified? Because I saw in the letter from the neighborhood association that they do have outdoor music.
Right, so the idea would be no live music outside and no amplified sound. By that I mean sound that would be amplified above normal conversational tone. So background kind of music is perfectly fine, just not turning it up.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments, or motions?
I do have one question. It appears, and I maybe I'm misreading the map with a site plan, that they're maybe losing an accessible parking space. I don't know if they'd given consideration to restriping to put that somewhere else.
That I don't know. We can, not sure who the applicant is, Penny, maybe we ought to promote them.
Okay, just one moment.
Well, let's see.
The applicant, this would be Joshua.
Walker,
Well, yes,
Yeah,
Joshua
okay.
Walker.
got
He
it.
he may be signed up to speak.
Good evening.
Joshua, let me swear you in. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes.
I can repeat my question for you, Mr. Walker, since you may not have been listening. My question was, it appears that the accessible space adjacent to the building may be lost. I didn't know if you'd given consideration to restriping for that space to be relocated elsewhere on the lot.
No, sir. We were willing to do whatever necessary, but wasn't sure what the best plan was to move forward in that regard.
Mr. Batchelder, is that a zoning question, or would that go before a different group that would review site plans?
That would go before the chief building official. Make that call.
Great. Okay. Thank you. I will not bring that up then and leave that to the building official to make a decision on.
Anything else or any motions?
I would just like to ask one question of the applicant. Well, did you receive a copy of the letter from your neighbor?
No, ma'am.
Oh, you didn't? Okay. Well, never mind. Mr. Batchelder, what do you have any response to his concern about the loss of parking? That was his main concern, wasn't it?
I think that was the main concern, yes. Well, it's a trade-off. I know a lot of these businesses in the neighborhood don't provide any parking, any off-street parking. This one happens to provide, I guess, 6 spaces right now, with additional space where people can pull up and, I guess, pick up food. So unusual in that respect. I don't live in the neighborhood, so I just can't comment on that. But I know that the neighborhood association has been supportive of these kinds of requests in spite of the fact that it reduces parking. So,
Yes, ma'am. I would just like to say, I think we received overwhelming support with the neighborhood. We've been there 10 years. We used to put trash cans out on the street before the city provided them. We've been a big part of helping to clean up that neighborhood and increase property values in that area. All of our neighbors, to my knowledge at least, love us. And I think it really has been visible, 7 p.m. on a Saturday, there'll be open spots left because people are walking or ride sharing, which, as a father of a 3-year-old daughter, I'm happy to see that more people are ride sharing and not driving drunk in this city, so I don't really think that the parking has been an issue. And if you ask the neighborhood, and, we had a lot of people on that call, and everyone was overwhelmingly supportive of just how good a presence we've been in the neighborhood for the past decade. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions, any motions?
I think that it's interesting, and I appreciate, Lee, that this has been sort of addressed, the fact that this COVID, whatever city council approved for these temporary spaces, I think we're seeing that the majority of people really like having these outdoor spaces, and the businesses are wanting to keep them, and the neighborhoods are in support of them. And I think by putting those conditions like we did on the last one, and again here with the no live music, that, hopefully these will continue to be, positive places to gather in these neighborhoods. And I would recommend approval. with the no live music and no amplified sound.
Motion for approval with conditions.
I'll
Is there a
second,
second?
I'll second it.
In a second, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Thank
Could I-
you all very much. That's it.
Could I just ask one question? It appeared to me that Robin said no amplified music, but Lee said like a reasonable volume on the music, which is kind of what we've done for the past 10 years. It's not like we're playing loud music. I just wanted to be very clear on that point, whether it was what Lee originally said or I'm not sure if
Motion
Robin
was no amplified sound above conversational level.
above the
That's what the ruling is.
understood. Thank you. I appreciate all y'all.
Thank you. Thank you all board members.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone. Thank you
everybody.
very much.
Y'all have a good
Alright.
night.
Yes.
Have a good night.
Be safe going home.